A growl that could vibrate tectonic plates echoed through the clearing, and Sergeant Callie Trent froze mid-step, a rusted wrench still clutched in her oil-smeared hand. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this jungle. Not on this planet. Certainly not standing 10 meters away from a Zarkith-class warbeast, the stuff of colonial infantry nightmare briefings and cautionary tales. It stood 3 stories high, scales like basalt armor, claws longer than her rifle, and 4 eyes glowing like dying stars. And it was looking directly at her. No, not just at her. Past her. At the rusty dropship hull she'd been patching together for the past 6 days using scavenged parts, duct tape, and increasingly desperate prayers to any Earth-based or alien gods that might accept emotional bribes. More specifically, it was looking at the makeshift cargo bay, where the sound of tiny growls and soft snuffles now echoed. Callie blinked. "You've got to be kidding me," the warbeast huffed once. Then, as casually as a drunk uncle at a barbecue, it turned and vanished into the trees, leaving 3 cubs behind. 3 cubs. Each about the size of a St. Bernard puppy, if that puppy had bulletproof plating, stubby horns, dagger teeth, and looked like it could gut a rhinoceros for breakfast. Callie slowly lowered the wrench. She considered screaming. That didn't seem helpful. She considered running. That seemed suicidal. Instead, she leaned back against the hull of her barely holding together dropship, stared at the sky, and muttered, "I'm never going to hear the end of this from command." The cubs mewed in chorus. One of them waddled forward and promptly gnawed on her boot. It had started simple. She'd been left behind. Or, in more official terms, accidentally logistically omitted during emergency extraction. Which sounded a lot fancier than, "Everyone forgot I went into the jungle to fix the comms relay and now the ship's gone." She was part of the human detachment sent to observe Zarkon 4's demilitarized zone, a buffer world between the Tarvax Dominion and the Coalition of Worlds. Nothing but dense jungle, humidity thicker than sludge, and ancient bioweapons from the 4th Galactic War that still occasionally woke up and tried to snack on wildlife. Great vacation spot. After the Tarvax dropped a kinetic rod into orbit, thinking the jungle was hiding human missile platforms, everyone bailed. The jungle burned for 2 days. Callie, thankfully, was in an underground relay station and survived. The extraction teams thought she didn't. So here she was, 6 days later, surrounded by heat, sweat, ruined gear, and now, alien warbeast babies. She stared at them as they sniffed and pawed at her boots, trying to decide if she was food, mom, or mobile furniture. Probably all 3. "This is not in the standard survival manual," she muttered. Her wrist comp was fried, her long-range comms tower was slagged, and the best she had was a short-wave distress beacon she'd barely kept running. So far, no one had picked it up. The cubs growled. One tackled another. The third started chewing on the ship's landing gear. Callie sighed. "Fine. You stay outside. Don't eat the hull. Don't kill each other. Don't kill me. We'll get through this." That night she barely slept. The cubs nestled beside the dropship, twitching and snarling in their dreams. Twice she caught one creeping toward her sleeping mat, and twice she bonked it on the nose with a hydra spanner. Gently. Ish. And in the morning? The big one brought her a dead swamp lizard. As a gift. "Congratulations," she said, holding the dripping, half-digested thing at arm's length. "You're officially the weirdest breakfast delivery I've ever gotten." The cub snorted, sat beside her, and looked pleased with itself. It was only day 2, and she was bonding with monsters. Over the next week, Callie's survival plan adapted to include feeding, corralling, and keeping alive 3 warbeast cubs who, according to every military database, should not even exist in this region anymore. Warbeasts were engineered for mass ground combat. Tarvax shock troops used them like living tanks. Their mothers were trained killers, their cubs potential death machines. And yet they listened to her. Sort of. She learned that the smallest one, with the curled tail and scar over one eye, responded to high-frequency whistles. The second one, broad-shouldered and stubborn, liked to dig trenches. And the third, the boldest, had already tried to chew her oxygen regulator, her signal beacon, and once her boot while it was still on her foot. She named them Twitch, Grumble, and Chew Toy. The Warbeast, the mother, never returned. Callie kept glancing at the treeline, half expecting it to crash through again in a hail of foliage and fury. But it didn't. Instead, something stranger happened. The cubs began mimicking her. It started with Grumble scratching lines in the dirt, while she mapped solar alignment patterns to predict satellite orbits. Then Twitch began tapping buttons on her busted wrist comp like it was trying to understand what she was doing. And Chew Toy, well, he stole her goggles and wore them upside down like a champ. And they were growing. Fast. By the 9th day, they were as tall as her hip, their stubby horns becoming lethal. And yet, they followed her. Protected her. Once, when a bone-spike centipede the size of a mattress attacked during the night, she barely had time to grab her stun rifle before all 3 cubs launched themselves at it in a blur of claws and fury. It was over in 20 seconds. The thing's corpse twitched once, then stilled. The cubs didn't even have a scratch. Callie stared at them, mouth open. Chew Toy yawned. Then dropped a severed centipede leg at her feet like, "You're welcome." "Okay," she said softly. "Maybe you're not just oversized puppies after all." And that was when she heard it. A low, reverberating growl. Not from the cubs. From the trees. She turned, slowly, and there it was. The mother. She was massive. Larger than the first time. Blood crusted her shoulder. One of her eyes had a long scar across it now fresh. Something had been hunting her. But her eyes weren't on Callie. They were on the cubs. And something passed between them. Something silent. Some genetic resonance or chemical signal that pulsed through the air like a forgotten language of the wild. Then the Warbeast turned her eyes to Callie. The jungle went silent. The cubs watched, unmoving. Callie held her breath. Slowly, the Warbeast moved forward. Closer. Closer still. Callie could hear her own heartbeat drumming in her ears. Then, the Warbeast lowered her head. Callie's knees almost buckled. It wasn't submission, it wasn't fear, it was something else entirely. Recognition. And then the Warbeast did something no living creature had ever recorded in Coalition history. She sat. Right in front of Callie. Calm. Watchful. As if waiting. That night, Callie sat by the fire. The cubs curled beside her. The Warbeast lay a few meters away, eyes glowing faintly in the shadows. Callie stared into the flames. "What are you waiting for?" The Warbeast said nothing. But Callie had a sinking feeling in her gut. Something was coming. Something worse than jungle predators or starvation. And whatever it was, the Warbeast had chosen her cub's protector not by accident. She had chosen Callie. As the humans' gaze drifted toward the stars, wondering if anyone was even looking for her, she didn't see the silver glint in the canopy above. A surveillance drone. Cloaked. Silent. Watching everything. The moment she saw the glint above the canopy, Callie knew she was no longer alone on this planet, and that the cubs weren't the only ones being watched. She snapped her eyes toward the trees, but the drone was gone, vanished like a ghost into the night sky. Too fast for a Tarvax scout. Too sleek for a wildlife tracker. And too quiet to be anything built for nature preservation. She hadn't transmitted anything significant in days. Her emergency beacon was jury-rigged to a battery that wouldn't last another night, and her last voice log was little more than a string of profanity and improvised lullabies aimed at Warbeast cubs. So who the hell had found her? The Warbeast mother hadn't moved. She sat, still as a mountain, watching Callie through those twin star eyes. The cubs snoozed near the fire, their tails twitching in unison. Nothing around her stirred, but her instincts, fine-tuned by deployments across 5 war zones, screamed of surveillance. And judgment. By morning, the drone's presence was all but confirmed. A fresh disturbance in the tree canopy. Strange, uniform indentations in the mud that weren't from paws or claws. Callie recognized the boot pattern instantly. Coalition issue. She followed the faint trail 50 meters through the undergrowth before it vanished into a moss bed as if whoever wore those boots had levitated away. She didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. "I need more coffee," she muttered, pouring recycled water into a scorched tin cup. But there was none. She hadn't tasted real coffee in 10 days. Just bitter, powdered substitute that came with her emergency rations. The same rations now being shared with 3 rapidly growing alien apex predators. "Grumble, no. That's not yours," she scolded as the cub tried to sneak an MRE out of her field pack. He blinked. Then, in perfect imitation of her usual reaction, let out a sigh and flopped dramatically onto his side. "You've been spending too much time with me," the Warbeast mother huffed. "She agrees," Callie said under her breath. That night, things escalated. It began with a low thump in the distance. At first, Callie thought it was thunder. But the jungle was clear, the air dry. Another thump followed. Then a third, heavier, slower. Rhythmic. Footsteps. Not footsteps from anything natural. These were metallic, deliberate. Heavy exosuit boots. She dropped flat and dragged her pulse rifle from the alcove she'd wedged it into. She barely had a charge left. 2 full bursts and maybe 1 stun pulse if the capacitor didn't short. But it was better than nothing. The Warbeast lifted her massive head from where she was curled beneath the trees. Her pupils flared with light. The cub stirred uneasily, snorting and whining. Then came the voice. Amplified, distorted, but human. "Sergeant Callie Trent. This is Colonial Recovery Command Unit 917. Stand by for extraction and compliance review. You are in unauthorized custody of classified xenobiological assets. Surrender immediately." She froze. That wasn't a rescue call. That was a detainment order. She ducked back into the hull of the dropship, flipped the power relay to high, and activated her shortwave jammer, just long enough to mask her signal. The voice came again, harsher. "You are in violation of Coalition Code 734 Delta. You will be fired upon if non-compliance continues. Last warning." Grumble bared his teeth. The Warbeast growled, low, dangerous. Protective. Callie blinked. They weren't threatening her. They were threatening her cubs. And she realized something terrible in that moment. They weren't here to rescue her. They were here to take them. She didn't know how long she'd have until they launched an assault. Whoever was out there, drone operators, black ops, biotech agents, they didn't care about her survival. Her reports, her logs, her record as an engineer in field tech, none of it mattered. Because the Coalition hadn't just forgotten her. They had written her off. And the Warbeast cubs? Likely tagged as bioweapons of opportunity. Salvage. Specimens. Test subjects. "No," she muttered, pacing in the firelight, checking her gear. She had no backup. No reinforcements. No working comms. Just 3 semi-trained death machines who thought she was their babysitter. And 1 Warbeast mother who hadn't blinked once since the threat started. Callie crouched beside her. "I don't know if you understand me," she said quietly. "But if you do, you need to know they're not here for me. They're here for your cubs." The Warbeast said nothing. Just flicked her tail once. Callie hesitated. "If you want to run, I won't stop you. But if you stay, I'll fight beside you." For a moment, nothing. Then the Warbeast stood. Not in panic. Not to run. But in readiness. The first attack came an hour before dawn. Silent shapes moved through the mist, 6 of them. Cloaked, armed with magnetic net guns and immobilizer darts. Coalition tactics: capture, not kill. But against apex predators, nets would turn to lethal traps fast. Callie waited behind her makeshift barricade, watching the jungle. The cubs were inside the dropship, silent as she trained them to be. She had no idea if they truly understood, or just mimicked her fear. Either way, they stayed low. The Warbeast stood by the treeling. The first agent approached, low, professional, weapon raised. She never saw him move. One moment, he was there. The next, the Warbeast was. She hit like a meteor. Claws raked through armor, jaws snapped through steel. The agent screamed once, and then was gone. The jungle exploded in chaos. Stun rounds flew. Net guns fired. Callie fired back, dropping 2 with headshots from a rusted scope she hadn't calibrated in days. Another tried flanking her, only to be barreled into by Grumble, who'd burst out of the dropship with Twitch and Chew Toy in tow. It wasn't a fight. It was a massacre. 10 minutes later, silence fell. 5 agents lay unconscious, or worse. 1 escaped, limping, dragging a comrade through the brush. The Warbeast paced slowly among the bodies, blood dripping from her teeth, eyes sharp and unflinching. Callie's hands shook as she checked her rifle. Then she felt it. A second drone overhead. She looked up, and saw it. No longer cloaked. Recording everything. Broadcasting. Not to the Coalition. To the Tarvax Dominion. And maybe, to anyone who had ears in the galactic black markets of biowarfare. It wasn't a cleanup mission. It was a trap. Callie stumbled back, realization crashing into her like a hammer. "They're framing me," she whispered. "They're making it look like I trained them. Weaponized them. So they can burn it all." The Warbeast growled again. And then, something impossible. She walked up to Callie. And pressed her armored forehead to hers. Callie gasped. A wave of heat, memory, and something deeper, empathy? Code? Neural resonance, flooded through her skull. Images. Fragments. Emotions. Pain. Loss. A battle where the Warbeast had been wounded protecting her clutch. A last effort to find shelter. Then trust. The Warbeast had seen her. Chosen her. Not out of desperation. But because she recognized something human scientists hadn't even imagined could matter to a predator species. Nurture. And now, they were bonded. The next day, Callie found her answer. She dragged the captured agents into a pile, recorded a message on her last functioning cam chip, and uploaded it via a high-frequency burst to the nearest relay buoy. She said everything. The threats. The drones. The cubs. And her choice. "If I disappear," she said, "they'll say I went rogue. That I corrupted wild assets. Don't believe it. The truth is, I saved them. They saved me. We made a pact. If that terrifies you, then maybe we need to ask why." She uploaded the footage. And then, with the Warbeast at her side, she left the jungle. Not to run. To hunt. Because she knew what would come next. They would try again. With more troops. More firepower. And less hesitation. But this time, she wouldn't be on defense. She'd be ready. And somewhere above, across satellites and surveillance arrays, one watching eye blinked. Then vanished. The sky turned the color of dried blood 3 days later, just before the second wave came. From the jungle's edge, Callie could see them, the silhouettes of incoming transports, their bellies glowing with drop thrusters. Coalition gunships, polished and weaponized, descending through thick clouds with purpose. Not a rescue mission. Not a recovery team. A purge. She clicked her teeth, a sharp command she'd taught the cubs. Twitch responded first, crouching low in the underbrush. Grumble and Chew Toy flanked him, eyes glowing, jaws tight. No longer clumsy pups, they moved with discipline now. Like a unit. Like soldiers. The Warbeast mother stood atop the ridge. Silent. Immovable. And behind her, Callie finished wiring the last perimeter charge to a retooled shuttle core capacitor. It wasn't elegant, but it would buy them minutes. Maybe enough. From her old dropship, gutted now, hollowed and redesigned into a decoy command post, Callie activated the signal repeater. It mimicked a functioning outpost beacon, one guaranteed to draw first contact fire. Let them waste ammo on ghosts. "They're coming," she said softly to the Warbeast. The mother didn't flinch. Didn't growl. She only turned her head slightly, as if saying, "Let them." The lead transport touched down near dusk. 6 commandos disembarked, their boots kicking up steam from the moisture-seared ground. Unlike the first wave, these wore no identifiers, no coalition insignia, no division markings. Black-clad, visors polarized, rifles locked to kill. Callie watched through the Warbeast's thermal lens, her reprogrammed drone feeding real-time telemetry into a screen she'd bolted to a tree trunk. She still didn't know how the Warbeast mother had given her access, but whatever mental link they'd shared had left traces. Enough to code, enough to adapt. That had been the real surprise. The cubs didn't just learn. They evolved. Faster than anything she'd seen. And now, they were hunting with her. The strike team fanned out. 2 stayed near the dropship decoy, prepping incendiaries. 2 more moved along the northern slope, classic pincer. The last pair headed straight into the kill zone she mapped with the Warbeast the night before. She keyed the detonator. The first charge didn't just explode, it roared. A white-hot wall of compressed ion fire surged from the undergrowth, engulfing the lead scouts. One screamed before falling silent. The other vanished in the flame. The jungle erupted. Commandos scattered. The team at the dropship opened fire blindly, hammering the metal carcass. Grumble launched from a camouflaged trench, jaws wide, claws flashing. He landed on the nearest soldier like a meteorite. One scream. Then silence. Twitch tore through the canopy, his movement a blur of motion and muscle. He didn't kill. Not yet. He wounded, hamstringing one commando, tearing the rifle from another. They fell hard. The survivors tried to regroup. That's when Chutoi triggered the net. A 2-ton slab of vine-woven mesh, soaked in ship fuel and rigged with monomolecular shards, dropped like death itself. It didn't kill outright. That was never the plan. But it did exactly what Callie intended, isolated. And then the Warbeast stepped in. It was not a battle. It was a reckoning. The Warbeast didn't charge like an animal. She advanced like judgment, cold, precise, unrelenting. Every motion lethal. Every strike final. The last 3 commandos fired in full auto. Their rounds sparked against scale. One managed a shoulder shot, but it bounced harmlessly, leaving only a smoking welt. She responded by flipping the soldier into a tree so hard the trunk snapped. Callie moved among the chaos, her pulse rifle firing clean bursts, aiming not to kill, but to disable. They didn't deserve death. Not all of them. Some were just following orders they didn't understand. But if they came for the cubs, they would leave broken. One of the fallen shouted for surrender. Too late. Grumble landed beside him, growling low, teeth bared. Callie raised a hand. No. The cub hesitated. Then backed off. She turned to the soldier, his visor shattered, one eye swollen shut. Who sent you? Special directive. Zeta 5. He gasped. Warbeast reclamation. No witnesses. Not even me? He laughed, wet, bitter. Especially not you. The transmission came an hour later. Direct to voice, coalition encryption, untraceable source. Sergeant Trent. This is command. Stand down. You are now considered hostile to Galactic security protocols. Your actions have violated containment regulations. The Warbeast specimens are to be terminated. Your record has been sealed. Extraction is no longer authorized. There was a pause. Then a whisper. We warned you. The channel went dead. Callie stood in the clearing, listening to the silence settle around her like ash. They weren't just abandoning her. They were erasing her. And with that, her choice became clear. I'm not running, she said, staring up at the stars. If you want them, you'll have to earn them. The cubs circled her, growling in chorus. Behind them, the Warbeast let out a deep, echoing snarl that rippled through the jungle for miles. The third wave was different. Heavier. 3 gunships. Drones. Automated turrets. And a portable orbital strike marker. This wasn't capture anymore. This was annihilation. Callie had 40 minutes to prepare. She didn't use it to dig trenches. She trained. Not herself, but the cubs. She drew diagrams in the dirt. Gestured. Repeated patterns. Twitch learned first, always the fastest. Shu-Toi followed, then Grumble. Simple commands. Basic flanks. Retreat markers. Avoid kill zones. The Warbeast didn't intervene. Until she did. When Callie placed a marker beside a pile of EMP charges, the Warbeast looked at it, and moved it. Callie blinked. The mother dug her claw into the dirt, and drew her own pattern. A 3-line triangle. Then clawed through the center, slashing it once. Decoy trap? Callie guessed. The Warbeast stared at her. Callie nodded. They were learning from each other. The final assault began at dawn. Callie watched from a ridge, her makeshift HUD pulsing red with incoming heat signatures. 22 infantry. 5 drones. 1 high-altitude bomber. She could do the math. They weren't here for prisoners. She activated the jungle relay, a last resort broadcast using frequencies older than the Warbeasts themselves. Coalition strike force inbound to Zarkon 4, Quadrant 17. No provocation. No warrants. Just blood. I hope someone out there is listening. She shut it off. Then raised her rifle. Twitch, right flank. Shu-Toi, disrupt left side drones. Grumble with me. Go! The cubs moved like shadows. The Warbeast thundered down the hill. The coalition never stood a chance. It was over in 18 minutes. The final gunship exploded mid-turn, caught in a double-timed EMP burst the Warbeast herself had triggered. The last 2 drones dropped like stones, torn from the sky by coordinated leaps from cub and mother. Only 1 survivor remained. A lieutenant, young, bleeding, and holding a black control box. Don't, Callie warned, pulse rifle aimed. He laughed through broken teeth. You've already lost. He pressed the trigger. Nothing happened. Callie smiled. Your override frequency was changed 2 hours ago. Behind him, Shu-Toi let out a slow growl. The lieutenant turned pale. Callie stepped forward. Go home. Tell them we're not property. Not weapons. And if they come back. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. The jungle behind her finished the sentence, with a snarl loud enough to shake the trees. They left that day. Not in shame. In victory. Callie buried the dropship's signal core in the wreckage. Rigged a false heat signature in the crater. If the coalition scanned the area, they'd think she died in the last strike. Dead, forgotten? Perfect cover. She and the Warbeasts vanished into the deeper jungles, past the old battlefields and derelict ruins. Into terrain no one dared map. Every night they moved. Every day they trained. And above them? More ships came. But none dared land. Not anymore. Because word was spreading. The Warbeast had left her cubs with a human. And now, they had formed something unheard of. Not a unit. Not a weapon. A pack. The jungle was never silent, but tonight, it was reverent. In the shadowed cradle of Zarkon 4's forgotten valleys, beneath a sky lit with the fractured glow of 3 moons, a pack gathered around their fire. Not soldiers. Not beasts. Something new. Something the galaxy hadn't accounted for. Callie sat cross-legged in the dirt, cleaning the final parts of her reassembled comms rig. Grumble snored nearby, half curled around her like a living wall. Twitch sat alert at the tree line, his eyes tracking a distant rustle. And Shu-Toi? He chewed. As usual. This time on what used to be a coalition-grade tactical helmet. The Warbeast mother sat across the fire, unmoving, regal. Watching. Always watching. And Callie, she was laughing. Who are we? She whispered to the smoke. What the hell have we become? No answer came. But she felt it, in every breath, every beat of silence, the acknowledgement. They were no longer fugitives. They were legend in the making. 3 weeks had passed since the last engagement. No gunships. No drones. Not even a scout. Instead, they'd gotten something else. Silence. Not defeat. Not surrender. but something deeper. Uncertainty. Coalition Command had been caught with blood on its hands. Callie's burst transmission, thought lost, had been intercepted by a Tarvax war monk and broadcast across neutral channels. Within a week, a dozen independent factions were asking questions the Coalition couldn't answer. Why was a decorated engineer being hunted like a traitor? Why had classified biological assets been abandoned on a quarantined world? Why had a Warbeast mother willingly bonded with a human? And above all, what did Callie Trent do to make it happen? She didn't have an answer. Not one she could explain in numbers or code. But she remembered the moment it changed, when survival turned into something else. It had been the second night after the last battle. The cubs had eaten. The jungle was calm. She'd curled up under an old calm's tarp, exhausted. And she'd felt the Warbeast lie beside her. Not near. Beside. Her flank pressed to Callie's side. Warm. Steady. Not like a guardian. Like a mother. And the cubs, one by one, had joined. Twitch curled by her feet. Grumble took her left side. Chutoy buried his head under her arm, whining softly in his sleep. She hadn't cried in years. But that night she did. Not from fear. From belonging. Now, every day, she trained them, not for war, but for independence. Discipline. Tactics. Patience. She taught them to disable, not kill. To use terrain, not brute strength. To work together. Even to think beyond instinct. They weren't just predators. They were students. And fast ones. Chutoy had already figured out how to unlock magnetic crates. Twitch could mimic the chirp sequences of the Coalition's tracking drones, and lure them into traps. Grumble once stole an entire backup power cell from a crashed recon pod, and now refused to sleep without it like some glowing security blanket. Callie was proud. And terrified. Because the galaxy wouldn't let this stand. Not forever. And sure enough, word came. It arrived in the form of a scarred Tarvax warrior, armor dented, weapon holstered, arms raised. He emerged from the jungle like a ghost from a forgotten war, his scaled hide gleaming with old ritual etchings. Two of the cubs rose instantly. The Warbeast stood. Callie raised her rifle but didn't fire. The Tarvax knelt. "I bring no harm," he said in thick, guttural common. "Only the invitation." She didn't lower the rifle. "To what?" The warrior tapped his chest, leaving a smear of dried blood. "To the trial of truth." She stared. "You know about us." "Everyone does." He slowly extended a scroll, a literal one, not a digital slate. Ancient. Written in fire dye and scale ink. "The galaxy watches," he said. "The Warbeasts were thought mindless weapons. You taught them restraint. Unity. Choice. I taught them how not to die. You taught them what it meant to live," he corrected. Callie exhaled slowly. "And what does your trial want from me?" "Nothing." He pointed to the cubs. "They want them." She spent that night pacing, the jungle alive with argument in her head. Trusting the Tarvax was insane. But staying hidden forever wasn't an option. Eventually, the cubs would grow too large to hide. The Coalition would come again. Maybe with nukes. Maybe with planet killers. Or worse, with the one thing she couldn't protect them from. Propaganda. "If you let them own your story," she muttered, watching the stars, "they'll turn you into a monster." The Warbeast stepped beside her. As if answering the question she hadn't dared ask. "We go. We stand. We show them who we are." The trial was held in orbit. A neutral ship. 1,000 delegates. Live feeds. And censored. They docked under escort, Callie in her ragged fatigues, the Warbeast beside her, the cubs moving in unison behind. A pack. Unleashed. The hall was vast, a bioceramic dome suspended in zero-G. Cameras hovered. Voices whispered. And Callie, once a nameless engineer, stood before the galaxy's elite. They asked questions? She answered them all. Yes, she trained them. No, not to kill. To choose. Yes, she defended herself. No, she never once used them as weapons. Yes, she bonded with the Warbeast. And yes, she still would, if given the chance. But why? Came one voice from the delegate ring. Callie looked up. At the cameras. The drones. The doubters. And the cubs who now stood calm, alert, at her side. Because I saw something you didn't, she said, voice steady. I didn't see monsters. I saw minds. I saw hearts. And I decided. She paused. Then said it loud enough for every world to hear. That teaching them how to live was better than teaching them how to kill. Silence. And then, the Warbeast stepped forward. Not to attack. To bow. Her head lowered. Her claws sheathed. And the cubs, grumble, twitch, chew toy, followed. A moment of awe rippled through the chamber. Not fear. Respect. The verdict came a day later. No charges. No punishments. But also, no commendations. Officially, the incident would be labeled unsanctioned adaptive cross-species development. Unrepeatable. Unofficial. Untouched. But it couldn't be undone. Because footage leaked. Of the cubs walking in step beside a human. Of a Warbeast not as a weapon, but as a mother. Of Callie not as an owner, but as a pack mate. And across 1,000 systems, people began asking questions. If one human could bond with a Warbeast, what else had the Coalition been wrong about? Today, Zarkon 4 is marked as a restricted zone. But sometimes, if you fly close enough to the atmosphere, you'll catch a glimpse through the clouds. Movement. Shadow. Roars in the distance. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll spot her. A woman in worn combat boots, walking alongside giants. Not a prisoner. Not a fugitive. Family. They say she still watches the stars from a cliff above the old wreckage site. They say the Warbeast lies beside her, always awake. They say the cubs are nearly grown now, taller, faster, but still following her lead. And they say one phrase, whispered in hangars and bunkers and black sites across the galaxy. The Warbeast left its cubs with a human. And never took them back. Because it didn't need to. It had already found something better than a protector. It had found a partner.